One of the most urgent tasks for our country is to decisively defeat the climate hysteria hoax.
We are in the beginning of a mass extinction.
The ability of CO2 to do the heavy work of creating a climate catastrophe is almost nil at this point.
The price of oil has been artificially elevated to the point of insanity.
That's not how you power a modern industrial system.
The ultimate goal of this renewable energy, plan is to reach the exact same point that we're at now.
You know who's tried that? Germany. 7 straight days of no wind for Germany. Their factories are shutting down.
They really do act like weather didn't happen prior to 1910.
Today is Friday.
That's right, Greta. It is Friday. And this is the best day of the week, not just because the weekend is almost here, but because this is the day the Heartland Institute broadcasts the Climate Realism Show. I am your host, Jim Lakely. I'm Executive Vice President of the Heartland Institute, which is an organization that has been around for 41 years. We are known as the leading global think tank pushing back on climate alarmism. The Heartland Institute and this show bring you the data, the science, the truth that counters the climate alarmist narrative you've been fed every single day of your life. There is nothing else quite like the Climate Realism Show streaming anywhere. So I hope you will bring friends to view this live stream every Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. And we have viewers from literally all over the world. You can also like, share, and subscribe. And be sure to leave your comments underneath the video. All of these very simple actions convince YouTube's mysterious algorithm to smile upon this program. And that gets it in front of even more people. And as a reminder, because big tech and the legacy media do not really like the way we cover climate and energy policy on this program, Heartland's YouTube channel has been demonetized. So if you want to support the program, and I really hope you do, please visit heartland.org/TCRS. That's heartland.org/TCRS. And you can join other friends of the program who give us a little bit of support so we can keep the show coming every single week. And before we get started, I want to thank our streaming partners. JunkScience.com, CFACT, What's Up With That, the CO2 Coalition, and Heartland UK Europe. We have a very big show today, so let's get started. Today, we have with us Linnea Lueken. He is Research Fellow for Energy and Environment Policy at the Heartland Institute. Anthony Watts, usually one of our panelists, is not here today. And Sterling Burnett, who is the director of the Arthur B. Robinson Center on Climate and Environmental Policy, is at Heartland. He will be joining us a little later. He's actually doing a radio hit as we're going live to the stream today. But we are very happy to welcome back to the show 2 special guests. One of them is Tony Heller. He's one of the best and most followed climate realist communicators in America, nay, the world. And he's also the proprietor of the Real Climate Science website. And we also have with us old friend Craig Rucker. He's the president of CFACT, and he just got back from Brazil for COP30, where a fire broke out. He was gone by then, but that fire was kind of right on brand for the way that the COP went this year, wasn't it, Craig?
Yes, actually, it was kind of an interesting event here, and the fire really does kind of culminate the whole series of disasters that took place down in COP, but I'm sure we'll be getting to that soon.
Hello, Tony. It's been a while since you've been on the program. It's great to see you back.
Yeah, good to be here, Jim. Thanks.
Who's that on your lap? We have another co-host, I guess, or guest.
Yeah, this is Sakura.
Sakura, excellent. Well, welcome to the show as well. It's not just 4 legs good and 2 legs bad. It's 4 legs good and 2 legs good on this show. So, all right, we got a lot to get to, but as always, we love to start the program with everybody's favorite segment, the crazy climate news of the week. Hit it, Andy. Thank you very much, Bill Nye. Got to be careful playing with fire, as they learned at the COP this week. All right. For my first item here, I have titled EPA Exodus. This story actually was a suggestion from Sterling Burnett, who again will be joining us hopefully midway through the show. And this comes from from E&E News. 2,500 plus EPA employees take Trump's resignation offer. I'll read a bit for you. Nearly a fifth of EPA's workforce has opted into President Donald Trump's mass resignation plan as he pushes to reduce the federal government's payroll. About 2,620 employees have taken the, quote, deferred resignation offer at EPA, according to figures shared with Politico's E&E News. EPA has reviewed all of its applications for the program, including all 4 rounds offered this year. At the end of September 15th, 166 EPA employees were on board at the agency. I'm sorry, back that up. At the end of September, 15,166 EPA employees were on board at the agency, its latest government shutdown plan indicated. Using that number as a baseline, more than 17% of EPA staff, a sizable chunk of its headcount, has left or will leave by the end of the year as part of the resignation program. In January, soon after Trump's inauguration, more than 2 million federal employees, including at EPA, received an email to join the resignation program, also known as Fork in the Road. They were offered a chance to leave public service, go on administrative leave with full pay and benefits, and then voluntarily resign later in the year. EPA officials validated the program in emails to staff and offered 4 rounds of deferred resignation to encourage employees to leave. The Trump administration, by the way, said it plans to eliminate the EPA research office altogether. Craig, I want to start with you. One, why the heck do we need more than 15,000 employees at the Environmental Protection Agency? And 2, is this just a good start or do you want to see more?
Oh, well, as CFACT works in Washington, we know a good many of these people. Actually, you have a lot of friends who work for the government, and I have a fair number that actually work for EPA. I think the article was correct when he called it EPA employees as opposed to government workers. They're more like employees than workers, a lot of them. There's a lot of fat in these agencies. They've, for a long time, been trying to cull it down. I mean, this is an agency that has been really kind of overrated. I think a lot of its functions could, in fact, be doled out to other agencies like Department of Interior and Department of Energy and others. So this is a good thing. As the old adage goes, no one's life, liberty, or property secure while government's in session. Well, I think the same could be said for when the government bureaucracy is working and the rulemaking. The most important thing they can do, and Zeldin is doing a good job of it, is to put the remaining employees to work at trying to find things that they can roll back and get government out of the business of America. And I think Trump's committed to that, on trying to roll back the endangerment fining, trying to free up our energy sources. And, good start, of course, is just remove the number of employees that we have that are busy and diligently working to create new rules.
Yeah. Tony, your website, it's called realclimatescience.com. I know you cover a lot of the science. Have you been watching what Trump has been doing, or do you have any reflections on how Trump has handled the agencies that handle climate science and energy policy since his second term began?
Well, I've always said that this was all about the money. And, President Trump has cut them off, at the roots by shutting down the supply of money. So now there's no reason for the people who've been involved with this all this time, academics and government employees and other people who've been profiting off this, they don't really have any reason to continue because the money isn't there. So I think President Trump, attacked them right at the source, and the thing's drying up and shriveling away because it just doesn't have any reason to exist anymore.
Yeah. Great. Well, we have people here in the chat. Scott Clay, a regular viewer, says, glad to see you, Tony, on the show, and we are as well. So yeah. That's good to go. All right. We're going to move on to our second item here. I've titled this Cup Failure in Graphs, I guess in graph form. I don't have a story to read this from, to set this up, but I can set it up a little bit. There's a series of slides here that I think paint a picture, let's say, and that's why we're glad Tony is here as well. So as all of our listeners and viewers know, this was, I guess, maybe it's been adjourned either today or tomorrow, the 30th Conference of the Parties, the United Nations big climate conference, CONFAB. The first one was in 1995 in Berlin. And to hear them say these meetings are important, you see, because without them, we would have no way to come to international agreements to stop the rise of CO2 in the atmosphere. But if we look at this slide right here, oh my goodness, that is a chart of concentration of CO2 molecules in the atmosphere, and it's Well, we've labeled the years in there. Tony, Anthony Watts did this chart today, and so no matter how many times they meet, guys, the concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere continues to rise. So that didn't really work out as planned. But they have also worked really hard to come up with schemes to slow the rise of global temperatures. I'm sorry, yes, that global temperatures. What's the next slide there? Yep, to stop the rise of global temperatures. Oh my goodness, that's another failure. At COP1 in Berlin in 1995, you can see about the middle of the chart, left third of the chart. Global temperatures keep rising, so that's they're planning. All the meetings they do didn't stop that. Let's see. How about sea level rise? You know, because that's something that you need to stop as well. We say, oh no, gosh darn it, sea level rise is still going up across the globe as it has been for quite a long time. But actually, this is the next slide I just want to show. You know, all kidding aside. This is a show that, or a chart I know I saw you share just this week, Tony Heller, on your excellent X and Twitter feed, and that's at Tony Climate. You definitely need to follow that. But when you look at this, you know, I love that little arrow. You are here. That most sea level rise happened literally 10,000 years ago was the last time there was a significant rise in sea level. Tony, if you want to talk about this chart a little bit, because you do share charts like this one and this very one quite often.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, just going back to your first slide with the CO2. I mean, every year they have these climate conferences, and they always announce these huge agreements and how important they are and how it's going to change everything. But the reality is that the growth rate of carbon dioxide has actually been increasing. You know, there's an upwards curvature there, so they're not actually doing anything. There isn't any indication that anything they've done has affected the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. So the next slide you had was the temperature. I mean, first of all, that graph's fake. You know, it's propaganda that's generated to support their scam. I don't actually believe those temperature graphs. So it kind of shows a contradiction between they're generating propaganda, which is not accurate about the temperature, and at the same time trying to use it to justify their own credibility. While it's, as you were saying, it destroys their credibility rather than proves it. Okay, next one, please. Yeah, this slide also is fake. If you look at tide gauges, there's no indication that there's been an acceleration in the rate of sea level rise. You know, if you go look at tide gauges all around the world, you can see they form a straight line. This graph shows an upwards curvature, which doesn't actually exist. So once again, it's the same problem. They're using a fake graph, which actually discredits all of their efforts, you know, as Anthony showed in the graph.
Yeah. Well,
so, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I suggest you go back, actually, Andy, if you could go back to that global temperature graph. I think it's the one right before this one. Yeah. Oh, no, the next. Sorry, there you go. Yeah. So actually, when I'm staring at that while you're talking, Tony, I think I spot the pause. Remember the pause from like 1998 to that? You see it in that chart. It's actually pretty funny.
Yeah.
So I guess it worked out in the 90s for a while, for about 10 years, but then it didn't work anymore.
Yeah, I've spent a lot of time analyzing these temperature graphs, and they're just not scientifically justifiable. They're propaganda. They use all kinds of horrible, unacceptable data handling practices to generate them. And I don't really see any indication that there's actually been a global temperature rise, anything like what they're showing in the graph. So the graph's fake, and it discredits their work anyway.
Right.
So it's kind of a double whammy for them.
Yeah. Well, it's from Noah. So speak for yourself.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Craig. Sorry.
I was going to say, I think that when you say spot the effectiveness, I think the climate conference, you got the wrong measure here to a degree. You're talking about stopping CO2 and, curbing temperature increase and those things. I've been to 27 of these 30 climate of the parties meetings going back to the 90s. It's never been about the science. This has to do with the money. So if you want to chart the effectiveness, look how much money has been spent on this going back then, and you'll see an upward graph that's quite astounding. I went to the first ones going back to Buenos Aires, and I was at COP3, was my initial one, and also in Kyoto. There might have been 10, 15,000 delegates that would go to, or people that would participate. It's up to 50,000 people now. Countries are actually battling it out to have this conference in their country. In fact, two of them, just from this latest COP meeting, included Australia and Turkey. I was personally hoping that Australia would win. I'd rather fly there next year for the conference, but wound up Turkey won. Not that Istanbul's that bad, but they've had it there before. And they're putting out big bucks. You talk to the Brazilians, it's a big revenue raiser down there. And the green zone, which is where a lot of the people are, used to be these hodgepodge of radical environmentalists. It's a place where they put the peasants kind of at these conferences. Is now filled with business groups. You got Siemens, you've got, ConocoPhillips, you got everybody there greenwashing, wanting investments, it's become business. So if your measure is actually in doing anything about the climate, that's one thing. I get that point. But this is all about the money. In fact, Gutierrez said that. Gutierrez said at the meeting that if we're going to be able to curb and stop the world from getting to 2 degrees Celsius by the year 2100, it's going to require us to get several more $1 billion put toward the Green Climate Fund. He wants $300 billion now and $1.3 trillion by the year 2035. And it's the amount of money we give the UN that will determine whether or not this climate rises or not. It has nothing, it has nothing to do with curbing emissions. It's the amount of money that the UN gets that will be the key determinant. That's scientific, right?
Right. We're going to get to that. We have a lot of money to talk about later in the show. For sure. All right. We'll move on to our next crazy climate news item. I titled this Climate Cringe. And I'm blaming our old friend Steve Malloy at junkscience.com for this one because he brought this to my attention. And after I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. And so now I must inflict it upon all of you. Andy, please play cop rap video.
In through the nose, out through the mouth. Fossil fuels gotta get phased out. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Fossil fuels gotta get phased out. In nose.
We need to make sure that our negotiators understand that a transition to clean energy also prevents local toxic health impacts from resource extraction. We haven't even studied those health impacts. So those numbers, those health costs are not on anybody's budget table. They are treated as uncounted externalized health costs, and that is unacceptable. So transitioning to a clean energy environment will decrease air pollution, decrease water pollution, and allow our healthcare systems to continue to function appropriately to take care of not only this generation, but other generations.
Are we all just fools? Make some noise if you think we should stop fossil fuel.
Ooh. Yeah, there's the energy of that video right there. I don't know, man. Linnea, look at all the fun we missed out on by not going to COP in Brazil with our friend Craig Rucker. Did the cringe meter in your brain break when you watched that as it did mine? Because mine's broken now. I got to take it in for repairs.
You know what? It's actually not as bad. I think I cringed worse when there was that video of the old people banging bongo drums. I think that one got me a little bit worse, but that was pretty bad. The only thing that popped into my head was that he was instructing them to produce carbon dioxide for the room. Well, he was telling them to breathe heavily. But yeah, no, it's just dumb. It's dumb. It's cringe. It's not going to do anything. I did like how they said that we need to stop fossil fuels in order to make sure that our medical systems work properly, or our healthcare systems. And I really would love to see how a hospital in a bad weather situation would fare without fossil fuels. Actually, I would not love to see that because it would be a catastrophe, right? If they didn't, turn on the emergency generators powered almost always by diesel fuel, it would be death and destruction quite literally. So yeah, no, they're clueless and cringe. And the clueless part is understandable, but there is no forgiveness for cringe.
Yeah. I want to, Andy, if you could I paused the video at a certain place. If you want to put it back up here, I did a double take here. I was trying to figure out what body part is he posing in front of, and it is a human body part. It took me a little while. It's not what you think. It's the lungs. Those are supposedly the lungs, and so that's where my cringe meter broke right there. The look on the guy's face. Oh my goodness. Well, all right. So Craig, you were able to avoid all of that. I guess you didn't see that live. Thank God for you. You might not have actually gotten back on the plane. You just may have just wandered into the jungle and never come back.
Oh, there's plenty of that stuff around. I would say, fortunately, I was spared that particular one. A vocalist, I think, did okay. I got to confess to you, the dancing left a little bit. I think they could have done better on that front. What they really emphasized down there was indigenous peoples. Now, that was kind of cool because they would play kind of their native stuff, and you felt like you were getting some sort of cultural thing going. You know, they didn't try to do kind of a rappy song with climate change as a syndrome. But so, no, I didn't see that one in particular, but saw plenty of others that were somewhat equally cringeworthy.
Oh. All right. Well, I can see that Tony Heller is still shocked, so we'll just move on so he doesn't have to speak about it anymore.
Well, no, actually, and the thing is that these young people have been raised to believe that burning fossil fuels is going to cause some sort of catastrophe, you know, in their lifetime. Originally, according to Al Gore, it was going to be before 2016, and then they just keep pushing it back. But the key is to educating young people, particularly, to understand that this is just, it's all fantasy. It's not real. There's not going to be a climate catastrophe, and the weather has nothing to do with carbon dioxide. And, you know, until we get past that, we're going to keep seeing things like that from people who are genuinely concerned that something horrible is going to happen if they keep putting gasoline in their car. So, I mean, it's fundamentally an education problem.
Yeah. Yep. Well, there he is. The Archbishop of Rancho himself has arrived. Sterling Burnett, thank you for being here. You missed out on our item on the EPA Exodus and the we just finished the climate change cringe, which there it is. That's what you missed. You missed no.
I gotta say, that hurts.
Yeah, no context video playing is perfect for Sterling. Just comes in cold. He's got to endure this.
If I have to, if that's what I had to miss, boy, they can book me anytime when stuff like that's going on.
Yeah, you can come in 20 minutes late every week from now on. We'll see how that goes. All right, well, let's move on to our next item. And this is about, this came across late. I found this story in Fox News. Don't really quite know what to make of it. But apparently Trump the other day said, Trump says officials, from Fox News, Trump says officials who pushed climate change doomsday policy should be investigated because they rewarded failure. President Donald Trump said Wednesday that officials who pushed radical climate change policy should be immediately investigated. While speaking at the U.S.-Saudi Investment Forum in Washington, D.C., Trump said the American people rejected, quote, failed far-left models, including regulation aimed at curbing climate change. And, instead of just reading more of it, we can just listen to this for ourselves. It only takes about 90 seconds. Could you please play Trump climate clip, Andy?
After 4 years of economic nightmares under the previous regime, Sleepy Joe Biden, he's a sleepy guy, wasn't he? Think he would have been here today? I don't think so. Americans have rejected the failed, and they were really failed, far left models that you were looking at of high taxes and massive spending, soaring costs, crushing regulations, and trillions of dollars in green new scams. Everything was a new scam, green. Look, I'm all for the environmental, everything. I'm all for climate change. You know, they have new word, climate change. It used to be global warming. It's global warming. Well, that didn't work because it started coming down. They did the global cooling thing. Then they just said, we can't keep up with this. It's too much. So we'll go, perfect words, climate change. They're covered. If it rains, if it snows, if it's warm, it's climate change is destroying the world. Remember? The world was supposed to have been gone 2 years ago. They gave us 12 years, Howard, to live, right? 12 years. But that was 14 years ago. The world was going to burn up, but it got actually much cooler. These people, it's a little conspiracy out there. We have to investigate them immediately. They probably are being investigated. Their policies punished success, rewarded failure, and produced disaster, including the worst inflation in our country's history.
Now, Craig, do you think Trump's being serious here? Do you really think he wants those who have manipulated data and distorted so-called consensus investigated? And if they were to be investigated, what would you investigate them for?
Oh, no, I think that that's Trump having fun up there. He's kind of, mostly right. His instincts are right. He got a little bit of the timeline wrong. It was first cooling, then warming, and a couple other things. But his heart's in the right place. No, I think if they're talking about investigation, and I think Zeldin's doing this to a degree at the EPA, it's to look at where the money was sent to do some of these crazy projections, to do some of this science. I think he did that when he took the money away, from what was it, $20 billion away from organizations and green groups that didn't even have websites. Stacey Abrams was a recipient of it. I mean, that's the type of accountability I think that he's actually going to. And we do spend way too much. You talk to some of the scientists in the past, William Gray, for example, and all his money was yanked and thrown to FIU. I had lots of stories also from other people, from Dick Lindson at MIT, of money that was going to a guy named Reggie Newell, and then it was yanked and brought to another facility over in England that would hype climate change. So this type of thing, I think, should be investigated. We're obviously spending money on those who hype climate, and it's long overdue, and the money is driving this thing. And we should redirect it toward honest research, or just save the taxpayers' money.
We need transparency of this stuff. There's no question about that, and that requires investigation. But when you're talking about sort of criminal investigation, I don't think there's much there. Academics can't be blamed for taking money from the government that they applied for and the government granted them. There's various laws that are passed that are really bad laws, but under those laws, money is given out. Where investigations can go, and maybe criminal prosecutions, even of government people, which is really all we can do, unless like private actors took money and then lied about how they used it. Say, for example, a representative took money under the pandemic money and then spent it on her campaign. But other than that, we know about the throwing bricks off the Titanic at the very end. And so if you investigated and found out that some of that money was going back to the pockets of those very same people tossing the bricks of gold, they get the cushy job at the new think tank that received all that money, that you might be able to get them for. If they are graft, if it's pure graft, you can get graft.
Well, I think what the president's talking about, Sterling, is there were some failed predictions. He was talking about how they said global cooling, global warming, then it turned to climate change. It's all over the map. I mean, his broad point is they're making crazy predictions. Who's making those crazy predictions? It's people that receive government money that are kind of, rewarded for making crazy predictions. If they were to come back with a study that said climate change, is overhyped and bogus, that would probably be their last grant. And we know that firsthand. So that's the type of thing that ought to be investigated. It's driven science by the money. And I honestly think the climate change issue in general is a money issue. The money that is flowing to the other side is huge. So long as that continues, and you see it on display at COP30, so long as the money is continuing to flow, this will remain a major issue.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I mean, Tony, we went through those graphs earlier, and you were like, "Well, this graph is phony, and that one is phony." And you look at the labeling on there that Anthony Watts put on there, and that comes from NOAA. I mean, one of the things that we've seen in the first 9-10 months of the second Trump administration is that at least the beginnings of trying to straighten out the science and to get it to be accurate and not propaganda is underway. Have you been keeping an eye on that? Do you how important is that? Do you think? I would think it'd be very important. And are you satisfied with the direction it's going?
Well, I've never thought this was about science. I always thought it was about the money. And so by President Trump cutting off the money, he cured a scientific problem which didn't really exist. I mean, the money isn't there anymore for them to produce this junk science, which they were using to pull more money into their junk science. It was kind of they had a vicious circle there where they make these fake predictions and bring more money, and they increase their fake predictions. And by cutting off the money supply, it's just the scientific problems has been eliminated because there never really was any actual scientific problem. In 2012, Donald Trump tweeted that the global warming scam was created by and for the Chinese to make U.S. manufacturing non-competitive. And I think he may not have been exactly right about that, but he hit the gist of it. That was what this was all about all along, was moving American industry and manufacturing to China, because that way they were able to say, well, we're not making the emissions, somebody else is. So and now with the AI boom, we're going to need this huge amount of electricity to power these data centers. China is building hundreds and hundreds of new coal-fired power plants, and we're shutting ours down, which we're going to need to power these data centers. So I think a lot of it goes back to what President Trump said 13 years ago, and he was absolutely correct. And that's the bottom line. If we don't get enough energy to power these data centers, we're going to be in trouble. And we have these vast reserves of coal in this country. Why aren't we using them? And I'd really like to see focus on, getting our coal development going on here in Wyoming. We have the largest reserves of coal in the country, and they're not being used. Our power plants are being shut down. The coal-fired power plants are being shut down when we should be building them. And it's, I'd really like to see a lot of focus in that direction.
Trump is doing what he can in that regard. He's reopening mines. He's stalling, putting on hold the closure of coal plants. Others are doing it voluntarily. The Four Corners plant has now filed one of the plants in Colorado has filed a petition saying we want to stay open longer than we had planned. But you're right about China, and China's the dangerous thing. China is a rock star at COP30. I think Craig will tell you, right?
Although it was there that the fire broke out today. I did not realize that it was actually so apparently it's no longer the blue zone, it's the red hot zone.
There you go. Well, China there is touting their big build out of wind and solar, and they are building wind and solar. There's no question about that. But they're building coal right along with it. And why is that? If wind and solar does it all? Oh, it's because they know the wind and solar ain't going to power their industries. They need the coal. The wind and solar is window dressing. They tell the world we're leading on the technology, and everyone's saying, "Oh, the U.S. is falling behind on the technology. We will lose the green energy race. We'll lose the green technology." That's a race I'm willing not to win. That's a race I don't want us in because it's bad energy. It is intermittent. It's weather dependent, and it's expensive. I don't want to go back to the time when we pray to the gods that the sun shines and the rain holds off or comes, and we're sacrificing people for that. Well, I want a modern economy that says we've got reliable energy, and we do. We've got 400 years of coal. We've got a couple of hundred years of oil and gas, and maybe more if we access not shale. We talk about fracking for shale, but actually shale oil and rocks. Now, it's prohibitively expensive right now, but if the technology comes along and the prices for energy continue to rise, it may not be that expensive in the future. So China is all bluster on the green technology. What they are not doing, their emissions continue to go up. Their coal use continues to go up. They are not peaking. And they don't anticipate peaking for years to come. When they talk about their emissions reductions, it will be per capita reductions. Well, anyone can do per capita reductions simply through efficiency. In other words, it goes down as a percentage of the energy used because they use the energy more efficiently. What they're not using is less energy, and they're not using less fossil fuels.
Well,
You're
yes.
being cynic here. They pledged that they will, though, starting in the 2030s, and they will become net zero by 2045 to 50. So they're making promises, Sterling, that they will at some point in the future do that.
When those promises are on a legally binding document that we can enforce, then I will believe it.
Well, we are going to get to that. There's actually one of the stories I added late to our show rundown gets into that supposedly legal binding document from the United Nations as far as when it comes to spending. But if you follow guys like Tony Heller at Tony Climate on X, or our friend Chris Martz, or Matt Wylicki, or lots of people, and it's easy to just get great information from great people like that on X. I've seen at least 3 charts this week in such feeds talking about how in the last 30 years, the percentage of energy globally generated by fossil fuels has moved this much, statistically insignificant. Yes, there's more wind and solar, mostly because of government mandates, but that's because the world needs more energy. There were 5 billion people on this earth 30 years ago. There's 8 billion of them now. Of course, we need more energy. So despite all this stuff, it doesn't, the percentage of energy sourcing doesn't change, can't change, and won't change.
Yeah, I've posted several graphs of China's energy usage. They're actually increasing their fossil fuels faster than they're increasing their wind and solar usage. So, the wind and solar thing's great for them because they sell it to the rest of the world, so that they generate a small percentage of their energy comes from wind and solar. They sell a lot to the rest of the world, and they use it as cover for all their huge increase in fossil fuel usage. And then they go to get COP, and like Craig said, they're the rock stars there, even though they're building hundreds of new coal-fired power plants. The whole thing's just a massive scam, and China is the beneficiary of it, just as Donald Trump pointed out 13 years ago.
And the scary thing is, on top of that, is that all this technology they sell the rest of the world, they probably have kill switches on it.
Yeah.
We know
Well,
they do.
they actually might.
Right? On the electric buses, we know they do.
Exactly. That's not a fake thing. That's actually true.
And so, if they get into a real geopolitical conflict with us, they've already said they'll cut off rare earths, right? Oh, well, okay, so you can't build your own magnets if you want to. You can't, because you're not mining it, you're not refining it yourself. But even the technologies. So they shut down half the grid because we've now made it reliant on China's solar panels with the chips and the I forget what the devices that turn the energy into the sun into electricity, and the batteries. They can shut us down. Is that what we really want to do? I don't think so.
China's getting a lot of credit because, and you'll see this at the COP meeting, people will say, and it's the biggest pavilion. You walk into the Blue Zone in the COP meeting in COP 30, the big Chinese pavilion was there until it burnt down, I guess, yesterday, but it was there with smiling pictures of Xi and packed rooms every time they would speak. And people give them credit. They'll say, and they'll come up to you at the meeting and say, but China's producing all the solar and wind and they're increasing their usage of it. And I go like, yeah, they're producing it to make a profit in countries that mandate it, kind of like in Western Europe and America. I mean, if there was a mandate in Western Europe and America that everybody had to put plastic swing sets on their front lawn, China would produce it for them. Yeah. They wouldn't put them on their own front lawn, but they'd be happy to be the world's leader in making plastic swing sets that everybody has to buy in the West. So the fact they're producing it is kind of irrelevant in the large thing. Are they themselves relying on it? Of course not. They've just commissioned within the last couple of years, they want to build and expand their coal fleet to a level that's the equivalent of what the U.S. already has on the ground here. That's going to be new expansion. So what we have now on the ground in America, which is now cut back to about 15, 20% of our electricity production, They're going to create that brand new tech between now and 2030. A leader in the, if I was a climate change worry ward, I think China would be the biggest villain, but they're the biggest celebrity at COP.
Oh, that's okay.
Other than Gavin Newsom, by the way. Gavin Newsom, it's we'll get to that, I guess. But Gavin Newsom's also a big celebrity.
That's okay, Craig, because they've committed to net zero by 2035 or 40. So what'll happen is they'll build these very, very expensive coal plants, and then in 5 years they'll cut them all off.
Oh yeah,
sure.
Right. They have 30 and 50-year lifespans, effective lifespans, but they'll cut them off in 5 years after spending billions and trillions of dollars on them.
Sure. Yep. All right. Well, Sterling, the next time you talk about kill switches and other conspiracy theories, you have to give me fair warning. I left my tinfoil hat in the other room and I couldn't go get it. So, all right. Moving on to our big topic today, which again, we covered this last week. It is a 2-week conference, by the way, and it's COP30, and their goal is to end fossil fuels. There's actually two stories we're going to read from here and get some interesting insight and commentary on. The first one is from The Guardian. Headline, more than 80 countries at COP30 joined call for roadmap to fossil fuel phase out. Countries from Africa, Asia, Latin America, Pacific, and Europe plead for transition to be central outcome of talks. If this sounds familiar, it should, if you followed any of the COPs. I'll read here. More than 80 countries have joined a call for a roadmap to phasing out fossil fuels in a dramatic intervention into stuck negotiations at UN COP30 Climate Summit. Countries from Africa, Asia, Latin America, and the Pacific joined with EU member states and the UK to make an impassioned plea for the, quote, transition away from fossil fuels to be a central outcome of the talks, despite stiff opposition from petrostates and some other major economies. Tina Steg, climate envoy for the Marshall Islands, very important position, flanked by ministers from 20 countries, told a packed press conference in Belém, quote, let's get behind the idea of a fossil fuel roadmap. Let's work together and make it a plan. So it'll go from a roadmap to a plan. I thought it would be the other way around, but I'm not a global bureaucrat. What the hell do I know? Campaigners hailed the intervention. Jasper Inventor, that's his name. Jasper Inventor, Deputy Program Director at Greenpeace International, said, quote, this could be a turning point of COP30. This was a strong signal coming from the global South and global North countries on the need to phase out fossil fuels. They are following the call of 40,000 people on the streets of Belém and millions of people around the world. The presidency of the COP and the rest of the parties have to heed this call. The climate needs it. The people demand it, unquote. A commitment to, quote, transition away from fossil fuels was the key outcome of COP28, held in Dubai in 2023. But several countries, led by Saudi Arabia, subsequently started trying to unpack the resolution. And the climate talks in Baku last year, attempts to follow up and flesh out that resolution, failed. This year, though, the Brazilian host refused to put any mention of the transition away from fossil fuels, unquote, on the official agenda for the conference. It was even excluded from, quote, presidency consultations that have been taking place behind the scenes on the 4 trickiest issues of the agenda. I thank you for your patience in me reading that because I found so much of it so amusing. Craig, as noted in the beginning of this podcast, you were at that COP 2 years ago. You've been to almost all the COPs now for quite a while. But, you know, you see, before, phasing out fossil fuels was a promise, or maybe it was a pledge. It certainly wasn't a roadmap, but it could have been a plan. I mean, gosh, it seems to me the climate alarmists are even tilting at their own windmills. There's like nowhere to go with this.
Oh, and I got to give Lula, he's got himself in a pickle here because not that I feel sorry for him. He's kind of a jerk, but he has some member states that are very dependent on oil, obviously the Middle East. And if you look at where the COPs were last year, it was in Baku, Azerbaijan, which is a major oil exporter. In fact, it was really kind of amusing last year when we went to Baku that there's all these oil fields as you go toward the city and where the COP is. And in the middle of the oil fields were welcome to COP 29, which was last year. And the year before that, of course, they had in the United Arab Emirates, big oil company. Egypt was before that. These are all countries in the Middle East that love it and would have nothing to do with it. They even put their oil ministers in charge as COP leaders of the summit. So now coming to Brazil, Brazil has a lot of offshore oil that it wants to move on. They also want their treaty. In fact, if you look at what they're pushing for down there, they want to see more use of biodiesel. Why? Because next to the United States, Brazil's the second producer of biodiesel. Again, this has little to do with the climate. It's a lot of economic posturing where countries somehow will say they're phasing out fossil fuels, but they're not. I mean, of the 190 countries, you got 80 to go along with this. Where's the rest? This is over 100 other countries that are not going along with this. And I guarantee you, a lot of them are the oil producing or energy producing countries.
I sent you a message, Jim, in the private chat, a link, because your story is behind the times. Just in 2 days, in 24 hours, in fact, that agreement now omits any mention of fossil fuel phase out. 80 countries wanted it. Now it's not in the text of the agreement.
So it ultimately failed. It didn't happen. So yeah,
it failed before it. It was stillborn. It never came to fruition. Now they don't have a treaty yet. They'll get something by the end of the conference or days after the conference. They'll go into late negotiations. But in the past, they've always focused on emissions and left it to countries to how to reduce emissions. We all knew it meant getting rid of fossil fuels, but it was directly on emissions. This was going to say, no, it's not a transition. We need to end the use of fossil fuels. And 80 countries were all on board. Now, the UK, which was one of the countries pushing it, says, we won't sign this new treaty if it doesn't mention fossil fuels. So it has collapsed. And look, China was there. It was never going to sign that. It was not one of those 80 countries, despite being the rock star. We aren't there. We were never going to sign it. Russia's not going to sign it. India wasn't going to sign it. A lot of European countries were agreed to sign it, but they've already put themselves in a death spiral with all their EU climate restrictions that are forcing their industries to leave and leaving their people shivering in the dark and complaining of high prices. So that agreement is, for all intents and purposes, dead on arrival. And in part, Trump has played no small role in that, simply because he said, we are not going to commit economic and energy suicide. You can do what you want. We're going to prosper. But other countries are saying, yeah, we want to do some of that prospering ourselves. Australia, I don't know if they were going to sign on to that, but it's funny. They've expanded coal mining, coal use, and natural gas. Even as they say, we're going to keep our Paris Agreement commitments to emissions reductions, even as we're building more fossil fuel infrastructure. China, we promise, we pinky swear that we are going to cap our emissions, even as we build more coal. Look, reality is what it is. The use of fossil fuels is not going away. They can sign an agreement that says it is, but it's not worth the paper it's written on any more than the Paris Agreement was worth the paper it was written on, or the Kyoto Accord was worth the paper it was written on, or the initial UNFCCC Earth Summit Agreement was worth what it was written on. They've had multiple treaties. Not a single of the goals have been met.
And I'll tell you, Sterling, the way that they keep them is the same way that Al Gore would keep them. What the UN is looking for is money. So even if you happen to be a private citizen like Al Gore and you're jet setting around the world, who, by the way, Al Gore was not a big figure here. It was Gavin Newsom. Gone is, Greta Thunberg and all that type of, and Al Gore. Now it's Gavin Newsom. But even if he's jet setting, if he's paying them to have carbon offsets, and similarly, even if you're a country like China and you can exude leadership, or the United States, if we pay enough money even if our emissions increase, we're being good global citizens and we won't be held. Countries have to put forward what they call NDCs, and they have to do that every 5 years, nationally determined contributions. Who makes a decision on whether a country is keeping in accord with the Paris Accord or not? It's the UN folks. And I have a feeling if you pay enough money, your NDC as your country will probably be approved, and they'll kind of overlook the fact that your emissions are going up and figure out a way to greenwash your country. Because, just like they greenwash Al Gore and others, if they pay enough money to get carbon offsets, they'll do the same for the America. We fell out of favor, and principally Trump has, because of cutting off the money and the access. Whereas Biden, of course, let it flow, and that's why he's a hero.
Yeah. You inspired me earlier, Craig, when you talked about how a proper welcome to a cop sign should be made. So I asked Grok. To make me a sign. I put in the prompt, make me a picture of the words "Welcome to Cop 30" spelled out by lots of little blue flames from natural gas. So there you go.
Nice.
That should be the one that greets everybody.
That's nice. I mean, that has kind of a cold feel to it with the blue and everything. I mean,
Yeah.
I would have thought that was ice, but we'll go with flames. I like it.
Not bad for just doing it in 30 seconds. I mean, Linnea, you worked in the petrochemical industry. You need to get one of those for Christmas, I think. That'd be a nice gift.
Yeah, that looks rad. I would put that in front of my house. I don't know if people would love it, but I don't know if it would go over super well in the dry season, but I might put it out anyway.
Yeah,
They might not even understand it.
Yeah. Let me get this. So there's a second story. Speaking of the money, this is actually pretty, this story also made me smile. Again, from our good friends over at the Communist Guardian, UK. The headline is, well, let's just say that the negotiations, as Sterling pointed out, are not going too great. Headline is, it's like arguing with robots. Negotiators of the state of COP30 talks. 3 representatives of developing countries speak candidly about meetings behind closed doors in Berlin. So, in the negotiating rooms at the COP30 Climate Summit, representatives from vulnerable countries work to get the best deal they can, according to this story. Here, 3 of them reveal what happens behind closed doors. Source number 1 said, we need to be guided by the science, and the science is very clear, but some of them argue against the science. The IPCC has made it very clear that 1.5 Celsius is critical, but you hear in negotiating rooms people opposing the science, saying, oh, there's other science besides IPCC, and, quote, that the IPCC is not, quote, the best available science. Wow, Craig, were you in that room? I don't know. This person, you snuck in there, didn't you? This person also says, this is really distressing to hear them say that. It hurts me. We keep defending it, but they don't listen. They don't want to listen. Here's another sob story from source number 2. When we are in the negotiating rooms, I get very frustrated with the developing countries' positions. We want a tripling of adaptation finance from 40 billion to 100 billion. Developed countries agreed last year at COP29 in Baku to 300 billion by 2035 in climate finance, but that's for everything. It includes adaptation, mitigation, loss and damage funding. A lot more of it should be for adaptation. You can get private sector money for things that make a profit, like clean energy. The banks will give you money for that because they make an investment back. No private sector company will invest in the things that we need for adaptation, like ways to store water from the rains or helping farmers grow different crops. Developed countries don't want to give us the money, but they're supposed to. Under the Paris Agreement, they agreed in Article 9.1 to pay us. We know that we did not create this crisis. They did. But we are the ones who are suffering. And then source number 3, speaking again about the reluctance to pay up $300 billion, says here, some of the most senior Global South negotiators are saying, quote, without a space to discuss this provision, why even come to COP? So, so guys, it's like, just give me the money. Just give us the money. But it appears that the developed world, always really, I think, intended to just virtue signal, but not really pay up, because the payments are always down the line. And the fact that the U.S. is no longer going to participate in this grift under Trump and give them anything, it's either that or they never really believed that the developed world is in actual physical danger because of climate change. And gosh, Tony Heller, it's just all about the money. It's all the grift, isn't it?
Yeah, in 1989, the United Nations said we only had until the year 2000 to save the planet from global warming. So here we are, we're 25 years past the deadline. They're still trying to get money out of people, even though they said it was hopeless 25 years ago. So obviously it's not about the climate, it's about the money, and it always has been. And, going further with what I was saying earlier, I mean, most of my time right now is spent developing AI related software. And I've been following this really closely. The United States stock market is very heavily dependent on the success of US AI hardware and software companies like NVIDIA and OpenAI. And they're competing against Chinese companies who have much lower cost electricity because they're burning coal. So this puts American companies at a huge disadvantage that we've got the expensive electricity here. We're not taking advantage of our resources. And if we want to be competitive with China in AI, we're going to have the electricity. And this is a really fundamental issue, and it's why I've been pushing it really hard. Yeah, it is about the money, and a lot of the money right now is in AI hardware and software, and we're going to need this electricity. So the United States needs to ramp up its coal and all of its available energy resources as quickly as possible if we're going to remain competitive with China in the AI wars.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, Craig, you kind of picked that story not on purpose at the time, knowing that you wanted to talk about the money. I mean, you have talked about the money, but just this idea that the so-called developing world keeps putting their hands out for money, but where are the big flotillas of climate refugees? The islands in Oceania are actually, some of them are gaining, a lot of them are gaining land. They're not being subsumed by the oceans, and so it's kind of hard to pay out for nothing because nothing is happening.
Well, and that's just it. You'll find that when you talk to the island nations, and I've done that on several of these COPs, because they tend to be shills for the Greens. The Greens must have some real influence in Tuvalu and places like that. Maybe that's where they vacation. But when you talk to them, their big deal is that, our island's sinking. I go, wow, well, it's all these greenhouse emissions that are causing it to sink, right? And I go, oh, yeah. And I go like, well, most of them are coming from China. No, we don't care about China. I go, well, wait, if you're worried about greenhouse emissions, you should be worried about China. No, they know China's not going to give them a dime. They're worried about our emissions, even if they're less, because they know the U.S. could pay them something. That's exactly what it comes down to. Their selective outrage kind of betrays them. And you talk to them personally. We had a chance, Mark Morano and I did. We were like talking to people from Pakistan, the United Arab Emirates. We went to a few African countries and talked to the delegates. They would actually do well on this show. They wouldn't actually doubt much of what we're talking about. They would say, oh, yeah, they're kind of crazy in the climate stuff and that. Why are they signing on when you see some of these agreements and stuff dealing with the Paris Accords and whatnot? It's about the money. They look at this as economic opportunity, not realizing this welfare payment may well come with strings attached to it and may actually impinge on their sovereignty because the UN's kind of call the shots, but they look at it as money. Plus, it's a pretty good vacation. You get to go to places like the Brazilian rainforest and, Istanbul or Kyoto and all that sort of thing. So I think a lot of these delegates are privately with us. But publicly, right after we're done talking to them, and they'll actually share some of the things that they think are alarmist, they'll come out and say everything as though they're a shill for Al Gore and everything publicly. It's really bizarre world when you're there.
No offense, but it sounds like some fucking commie gobbledygook.
I want to go back to the article, how it began. I won't talk about the money. Tony and Craig have talked about the money. They said they follow the science. It was about the science. They need the money because the science says they're going to be destroyed. And we can't give up on 1.5. And the UN supports that. The UN has already said 1.5 is out of reach. The UN doesn't support that. And it was never 1.5, 2.0. They were never built on science. Those were political goals, political decisions. Who says so? Well, the people who negotiated says, well, yeah, you know, it was just a decision that we made. We had to set the target somewhere, but it has no scientific backing that shows there's some kind of tipping point if we reach 1.5. And if there was, we're in trouble because we're past it. Just like we're past all those deadlines for New York being underwater, the end of, you know, AOC said the end of the world by 2020. All of the goals, all the deadlines that they've set, all the tipping points that they've said are tipping points, we've been past them or are we fast approaching them? None of the disasters have come. That's the science. Science is data, not climate models, not pronouncements from on high at UN conferences. And the data doesn't support the claim that anyone's following the science at the UN.
Now, it's information like that you're saying, Sterling, which is why they passed another declaration in the conference called the Declaration on Information Integrity, and why this climate realism show may well be off the air if United States phones, joins under a President, Newsom down the road. 12 countries, of course, signed this, and Gutierrez got up on a public stand saying that what's stopping them from achieving their goal is climate denialists that are controlling the algorithms. So they're going to pressure some of the major tech companies to start
controlling the algorithms.
Yes, it's you. You're controlling the algorithms. I talk about projectionism. I think a psychologist would call it that, where you're accusing the others of what you're doing. And while you may take this, the U.S., of course, didn't sign. Canada did, to the north of us, as did some European nations. They're putting $100 million into this to be able to try to shut up, Tony Heller and Sterling and James Taylor and Linnea and all the people out there. So you guys are the ones, according to Gutierrez, that are stopping, any good thing from being done.
So you're saying when we have a President Newsom, that this will all change. My suspicion is, look, 100 million to me, a lot of money. I'll take it. Probably, to anyone on this call, 100 million, man, we're swimming in it. 100 million compared to all the AI, all the bots, all the search engines, all the big tech guys, it's beneath their margin of error at the bank.
Good point. But they do want to investigate your donors, and they may want to pull your tax status. So that's another thing they discuss there too. That could be more painful. Yeah. So they are talking hardball against climate denialists, of which everybody here would have a big X on us. I'm sure.
Tony, jump in here.
Yeah, I've been self-funded the whole time, which is why I've been able to do this. But I've lost jobs, I've lost contracts. I work for a very large tech company who walked me out the door the day after I attended a EU climate conference in 2011. They wanted to promote themselves as being a green company, and I didn't fit the bill after doing that, so they walked me out the door. I've been there for many years, and I've lost contracts, and people found out who I was. But fortunately, I've been able to self-fund myself, and also through donations on my blog to keep me going. So yeah, it's a huge problem, and it's something I've been fighting all along. I was kicked off Twitter, I've been kicked off YouTube, suspended from YouTube several times. So it's an ongoing campaign of pressure to shut down people presenting contrary information to their propaganda.
Yeah. I mean, you reminded me, I've known you for a long time, Tony, and I've known but you wrote under a nom de plume for many years. You were not out there as Tony Heller publicly.
Yeah, I had to. The company that I was working for, had I written under my own name, they would have walked me out the door then instead of in 2011. so I had no choice. Eventually, I switched over to my name, but I've probably lost millions of dollars in opportunity cost because I'm doing this, which is fine because, I want to do the right thing and I enjoy doing what I'm doing. I've made a lot of friends, but yeah, there's a real cost to going up against these people.
Right. Well, I guess we're in the interregnum right now because the rule has always been suppression and not free speech. So, all right. Well, speaking of free speech, I want to tell everybody here and speak freely about the sponsor of the Climate Realism Show, and that's our friends over at Advisor Metals. If you listen to a lot of conservative shows like I do on YouTube and other streaming services, you hear tons of pitches for buying gold and silver and other precious metals. There are a ton of companies out there offering you those precious metals. But I want to tell you why you should trust the sponsor of this program, and that is because of the man who runs Advisor Metals, and his name is Ira Brashatsky. He is the managing member of Advisor Metals, and he does not employ the kinds of high-pressure tactics or deceptive marketing ploys that you may find from others in so-called big gold. Ira also does not deal in so-called rare coins. When you buy gold and other precious metals from Advisor Metals, you are dealing in quality bullion, and that is so much better when it comes time to liquidate this valuable physical asset. Oh, and when you buy from Advisor Metals, you will have that investment sent discreetly, directly to your very home. Also want to mention that Ira is advertising on this program because he is an America First patriot. He does not donate to Democrats. He does not work with proxies of the Chinese Communist Party, and he, like us, abhor the machinations and schemes of outfits like the United Nations and the World Economic Forum. And we are proud to have Advisor Metals as our sponsor. So if you want to diversify your investment portfolio, if you want to back up your IRA with real physical bullion of precious metals, please go to climaterealismshow.com/metals. You can leave your information there, and Ira will be in touch with you and make the process very easy for you. Again, climaterealismshow.com/metals. And be sure to tell them who sent you, because that helps us and this program while you're helping your financial future. All right. We are ready for probably the favorite segment of this show, certainly for our audience, and that is Q&A. Take it away, Linnea.
I like how Jim got cut off by that this time. All right. So thank you, everybody, for all of your questions and comments. We got a lot of really nice comments today, especially for Mr. Tony Heller, who a lot of our audience are big fans of. So, Tony, I'm going to read a couple of these very flattering messages towards you for a second here. Weathercat says, "Thank you, Tony, for your sacrifices. I've been watching you for years. I've opened a lot of minds with your knowledgeable videos and posts."
Thank you.
And then Bo, a common viewer of ours, not common, but frequently here, says, "Question for Tony. Jim was saying on In the Tank yesterday that he argues with Grok about baseball statistics. Can Visitech help him out?"
Visitech is really good at data analysis. That's what we're working on, but it doesn't provide source information. But if there was a specific problem that you were interested in, you could post it to me on X, and I'd be happy to take a look at it.
I'll be in touch.
You don't have to go to him for that. If it's all things baseball, you come to me. It's the only sport I care about.
Trust you, Sterling.
You're
You're a biased source. All right. All right, here's another question for Tony, although this is a scientific question. Nothing As It Seems says, "Does Tony Heller know how they go about manipulating the satellite data? Is it at data acquisition, transmission processing, image interpretation, or all of the above?"
Yeah, that's a really good question. There's a lot of issues with satellites. The ones that I've been particularly interested in are like the Greenland surface mass balance and sea level. I mean, they're trying to measure very, very small changes from a satellite, which it's in decaying orbit. The surface of, like for sea level, the surface of the ocean is very rough. There's all kinds of issues which they've got going on there. And it's just not realistic that they can do accurate measurements of sea level from satellites. And if you look, the University of Colorado sea level site used to provide an error map, and they regularly showed that the error was just as large as the claimed trends. It was basically meaningless data. And for the Greenland surface mass balance, what's really interesting about it, they're using a satellite. They're measuring gravity from coming from the Earth, from a very thin ice sheet, which is only 2 miles thick, that's sitting on top of thousands of miles of rock. And the rock density is much higher than the ice density. They have no idea what's going on underneath the ice sheet. And so they're attributing all of the changes they see in their grace gravity to the ice sheet, even though it's only a tiny fraction of what's actually producing the gravity. So once again, they just make completely meaningless assumptions about what's going on underneath the ice, and they use that to calculate the ice surface mass balance. You can look at their surface mass balance maps, and they show a huge amount of ice loss in southeast Greenland, where the Glacier Girl aircraft was from the 1940s, was found under hundreds of feet of ice. And so their satellite measurements say that they're losing ice there, but at the same time, we can physically see that they've gained hundreds of feet of ice over the last 90 years. So yeah, those are really good questions, and I could spend hours going over what's wrong with them, but you can't use satellites for accurate measurements of sea level or surface mass balance in Greenland. There's other techniques. I'm sorry, I said surface mass balance. That's not what I meant. It's the gravity anomalies. The surface mass balance is actually a fairly accurate model. And for sea level, they're much better off measuring that from tide gauges than from satellites. So it's great. Those are great questions. It would take me a really long time to go into a lot of detail about what's wrong with them. But yeah, I've spent many years studying them, and I'm kind of astonished that they continue to try to scam people with that satellite data, which just is not scientifically justifiable what they're doing.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Another.
Hold on 1 second. Craig Rucker, I know that you have to leave. I know last time you were on the show, it was a 60-minute show, pretty much on the button, but we have so many people who have questions, so we tend to go long. So
thanks for having me on. Always a pleasure and a great honor to be on with the great Tony Heller. And so, and you too, Sterling, and Linnea, of course. She's another one. So, Jim, you're just the host. You're Ed McMahon. Is that
stick around just for this comment here, Craig, because this is from La Raza for Trump, who says decades of pushing by good folks like you are being pushed across the finish line by POTUS. Winning is a lovely thing. We're not tired yet.
Yay.
Craig is definitely part of that. The scary climate denial cabal.
Well, thank you, folks. Keep the faith, and thanks for having me on the program.
All right, see you next time.
Well, President Trump's understood for a long time that this is a scam. So he was one of the first people to really start using that word. So, I think we're really lucky to have him as a leader, and doing exactly what needs to be done, which is shutting down the funding for the people who've been benefiting from this.
Well, I've got another flattering comment for you, Tony, from someone who says, my cousin's daughter was taught in school that we are doomed. She was scared to death, so I pointed her to Tony Heller's YouTube videos. She now realizes the lies. That's awesome to hear.
Yeah, I used to work.
In the future, you can point him to some of Linnea's videos as well.
Okay.
Good plug, Sterling. Shameless, but good. All right. Here's another good question for Tony from Mikhail Johansson, who is one of our frequent viewers down there, I believe in South Africa, who says, Tony, I'm impressed with all of the historical and old weather-related articles you show. How do you find them?
Yes, that's a good question. Yeah, some of them people just send to me. But most of them I just get from newspaper archives like newspapers.com or the New York Times archives. The Australian government has a really good archive called Trove. And they're all digitally archived, and so you can search by keyword, and by time period and comes up with all kinds of amazing stuff. These days, it's so easy to do this kind of research. I can find whatever I need in a matter of a few minutes. Plus, now we've got AI to assist us. I just use AI to look up historical information about stuff, and it tends to be pretty good as well at producing information for me. But really, the main thing is the newspaper archives. If you're really interested in doing this yourself, get a subscription to newspapers.com, and you can bang at it yourself, come up with all kinds of amazing stuff.
I've been corrected here. This viewer is actually from Denmark, so I was about the entire width of the planet off, but that's okay. All righty. So let's see. This is a good question from Wheelman, who says, we know that plant death takes place at around 150 parts per million. Is there a maximum concentration for carbon dioxide in the atmosphere? Do we know the answer?
Well, we know that the greatest expansion of life on Earth occurred 540 million years ago, when carbon dioxide levels were 10 to 20 times higher than they are now. So we know that we can go up 10, 20x, and life thrives at those levels because we have millions of years of historical evidence proving that. I mean, at some point, it's going to become unhealthy. If carbon dioxide levels get too high, people start getting dizzy and start suffering other issues. I don't know how much it's going to affect plants, but we know that life has thrived and done extremely well at levels 10 to 20x higher than they are now. So we're nowhere near any point of danger.
I don't think we know what the maximum. We can know human health wise what a maximum might be that's safe for us. It would be, as he said, more than 10 times what it is today. Safety margins on submarines are 5,000 parts per million. But I don't think we know what the maximum concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere could be, because we'd have to know how much carbon dioxide is stored in carbonaceous rocks in the soil and how much is stored in the oceans. Because, you have to know how much is out there before you know how much the atmosphere could theoretically hold at maximum. If it's all expelled, none of it is stored in rocks or soil or the oceans, anywhere else. And I don't think we have that calculation.
In 1920, sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
In 1920, Scientific American did an experiment where they pumped carbon dioxide, industrial carbon dioxide, over agricultural crops, and demonstrated a huge increase in crop productivity as a result of this piped-in industrial carbon dioxide. And in 1921, a well-known German scientist said that the most serious problem facing humanity was providing enough food for a growing population. And he said the easiest way to solve this problem was by increasing the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. So before all this climate alarmism started, the scientific community understood very well that more carbon dioxide was beneficial for plants, and it was beneficial for the human race as well.
Yeah, I mean, look, the godfather of global warming, Nobel Prize winning physicist Sven Arrhenius, that is the one that identified carbon dioxide as a greenhouse gas and says it's warming the earth. But his thing was, and that's a good thing. He didn't see it as doom. He said it's a good thing because it'll be a warmer earth is better for health, and it produces more plant life, which we need.
It's like, Richard Lindzen's pointed out many times, people are going to look back on this time and just think that we were crazy to have thought that carbon dioxide was something dangerous or something bad, when in fact it's something we need more of. And Will Happer keeps pointing this out as well. So, this climate scam is very damaging to the world population, but particularly to the West, who's bought off on it. because, like President Trump said in 2012, it's making us non-competitive with China for manufacturing and now for AI. We're running into similar roadblocks with AI. We've got to forget about this whole carbon dioxide thing and think about energy, because that's what we need now is energy. We need coal, we need natural gas, we need nuclear, whatever it is. But if we're going to keep up with China in the AI race, we're going to need a lot more energy than we've got available right now.
Kite Man Music has a question, but I'm not entirely sure what's being asked here. They say, could not more accent be put on the saturation curve of CO2 being logarithmic? And I wonder if what they mean by that is, could more focus be put on the logarithmic
emphasis?
Saturation?
Probably,
Yeah, emphasis.
Well, I don't like arguing with the climate alarmists at that level. To me, it's always looked like a scam. And, getting into the details of, carbon sensitivity, to me, is just kind of a waste of time, because you'll never convince them anyway. And, just focusing on the issues like we're doing on this show, which is money. This isn't about science. It's not about some scientific debate. It's about people are scamming for money, and like China pushing an economic agenda, which they've been very successful with, shutting down Western manufacturing and moving it to China. So, there's people who like to discuss, the scientific aspects of it, but I don't think they're really there. I think I prefer to focus on the economic stuff and the political stuff.
I don't necessarily disagree with Tony, but I'd say this. Look, Waldavsky did research in the past that showed about 5% of the population cares about data and charts and research. That's what moves them. Not cares about it, but that's what moves them. Real factual information. About 5% completely driven. They don't care about data at all. Completely driven by emotion. The rest of the population is driven by their predispositions, how they were raised, how they're educated. And I think Tony is right to some extent that you get down in the weeds. When I talk to somebody about saturation, their eyes glaze over, it goes above their head. You got to talk to people where they're at, and where they're at is, I get on the elevators and it's unusually cold, and I say, boy, that global warming is killing me right now. And they say, yeah, this is crap. When they're suffering the cold, or if you want to talk about data, you can say, do you know that fewer people are dying now than ever before from weather? And they say, really? I mean, that's an info fact, but saturation is it's like, well, what about 5,000 parts per million? They don't even know what a part per million is. I mean, most people don't get into the weeds like that, but they care about whether they're going to die or not die, whether they can feed their families or not feed their families, what climate is doing there. Is a hurricane going to hit their house? Stuff like that.
Yep. And speaking of that, I'm going to shift the topic of these questions a little bit back towards the COP30 topic. And so Ed Reed asks, what has been lost? What has been damaged? And that's with regards to the claims of some of those developing countries asking for money at COP30.
The Maldives government started pushing the whole climate reparations thing, a few decades ago. He said, we're going to drown. You need to pay us for damages. Of course, nothing's happened. The Maldives have actually grown since then. And they've probably taken the money they were given to build new airports to bring in long-haul flights. It's been very beneficial to them having these guilty Western countries send the money for something that was just completely fictional, and it gave them money they could use for other things, which they've taken full advantage of. So they're taking advantage of sort of stupid Western guilt for something that has nothing to do with science, nothing to do with climate. It always comes down to the bottom line. It's about the money.
Looking at Maldives in particular, the money they've gotten, was it spent on seawalls? No. What was the spin on? Hotels and a new airport. So they're going to bring in more people on jets that emit carbon emissions and put them up in hotels that take more electricity that emit carbon emissions. rather than building seawalls, retreating from the coastline, now they're building hotels right on the coast. This money is, I won't say it's misspent, but it is if you really believe climate change is going to cause disaster. Look, when they looked at some of the UN spending, some of the money that has been put in there, it's never been what they said they would, what they promised, but they have put millions of dollars into it. And they found some of that money was spent on like a love story filmed in Argentina. Well, that's going to change the climate. Or it was spent on building gelato shops in different countries. Oh, yes, an Italian gelato company expanding its reach, that's going to change climate change. I guess the gelato can cool some people off when it gets hotter, but it's not going to mitigate climate change. You know, they are taking, like he said, they're getting money. They're not spending it on what they say they're going to spend it on.
Yeah, it's almost too bad none of us were smart enough or, diseased in the brain enough to take advantage of these handouts, right?
If you want to send me $100 million, I'll build a gelato shop in my downstairs.
Yes, you're sequestering it.
Yes.
And in terms of loss and damages that a lot of these countries claim is they're just taking advantage of the fact that the media narrative and the narrative from IPCC's summary for policymakers is that climate change is causing all these weather disasters, right? So you'll have like Sudan or something will have a drought and they'll say, well, this is because of climate change. Therefore, we need Western countries to give us something so we can get through this drought. It's of course nonsense because climate change is not causing them to have more drought, but they're able to make that claim because that's the claim that's being peddled at IPCC and by world governments basically.
And that's why they want to silence us. That's why they have these now. They're going to ramp it up again. They want to be ready to hit the ground sprinting if they ever get control over social media again, alternative media again. If they can control it, they will. They tried, they succeeded, and then we had a change in regime, so they had to slow down. But it's coming.
I was good friends with Bill Gray, and he frequently told me the story about how in 1995, he'd been doing his hurricane research for decades, getting money from NOAA every year for his research. And then in 1995, when Al Gore became vice president, Gore called him up and invited him to a climate conference he was having in Washington. And Bill told him, I'd be happy to come to your climate conference, Mr. Vice President, but you should know that I'm not a big believer in your global warming theories. And what happened was he immediately got blacklisted, never got another penny out of the government. And for the next 20 years, until he passed away, he funded all of his work, his research. He funded Phil Klotzbach out of his own pocket, at Colorado State University. So this started, this big money pressure started with Al Gore 30 years ago. And they used it they created this consensus by saying either you go along with us and you get your funding or you don't, we cut you off. We ruin your life, we ruin your academic career. And Bill was very lucky that he had the financial resources to self-fund himself. But how many scientists have that? Not very many have it. So they got forced into going along with the scam. And there are not many people with the integrity of Bill Gray, and he's been my role model, for decades because he, was amazing character to stand up for science rather than for the big money agenda driving
this. Chris Nesbitt asks, oil and gas are used for much more than just energy. If we stopped extracting them, what do alarmists propose will replace them for all those other uses? Or do we just pretend like that's not a problem? Yeah, well, and I'll answer this in part quickly here. Usually people will kind of squirm around and shift and squirm, and they'll say, well, I'm not one of the leave it in the ground people. I think we should be getting it, but we shouldn't be using it for fuel. Well, that doesn't work because most of this stuff is a byproduct of refining for fuel. So you still need to do refining in the first place, and then I don't know, you just pour out the gasoline. I don't know, but there are a lot of people who are leave it in the ground people, and I have received an answer. I did ask someone while I was in college who was one of the like greenies who was in a geology course with me, and his answer was, well, you can use hemp to make plastic. And I was like, yeah, all right. So I decided that it wasn't worth continuing in that conversation with him. So guys, if anyone else has anything to add to that one.
Well, that's the thing is you can make plastics out of biological material, right? Do we really want to divert all our crops into plastics for tubing for hospitals? I don't know. For hospitals, we'll just go back to glass bottles. So when you drop those, they shatter, and now you've got a toxic.
Yeah, and that doesn't take any energy to produce.
And that doesn't take any energy to produce. Oh, well, steel. You don't have to use coking coal for steel. You'd use high heat electric furnaces. High heat electric furnaces. Yeah. What do they burn for fuel? And then they don't make as strong as steel. They use recycled steel, but it's not good for some uses. They'll come up with answers, or they'll just say, well, yeah, we got to have some of it for some of the things. My computer, for example, got to have a plastic case around that. The wiring, we've got to have the plastics around the wiring so it doesn't short out. But other than that, it's like, you're right. They make up things. They say we can do it with this or that, and we can't do it with this or that.
It's magical thinking. Short and sweet.
Yep.
Yeah, and most people who are supporters of this really just don't think that far at all. They don't know.
Yeah, that's right.
One of the things I like to point out is that before petroleum and kerosene, cities were led with whale oil, and whales were going extinct because there was increasing demand for whale oil, and the whales weren't reproducing fast enough. They would have gone extinct. Petroleum, the discovery of petroleum in the 1850s in Pennsylvania actually saved the whales. So
and before cars, we had wagons and carts drawn by horses and oxen. We left a lot of crap in the streets and was making people sick of miasma because we couldn't get rid of it all. That was death. Now, my nieces, contrary to what you might think, Linnea, my nieces know, because when they talk to me about climate change, I go take away their phones. I say, oh, yes, I agree. You got to do with all this plastic that's made from fossil fuels. It's like, whoa, 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 ho. Let's not go crazy there, Bubba. Let's not go crazy there, Uncle Bubba. Not my phone, not my laptop.
Absolutely. All righty. I've got, a couple of quick questions here. Tony, Walter says, I've missed Tony's podcasts or posts on YouTube. Where, again, can we find his work?
Yeah, I've been really busy with my software development and over the last year, and unfortunately have not been doing a lot of climate videos. The videos I've done have been more related to my software. Some of them have a climate overtone to them. I really should do more. Yeah, I know a lot of people have told me they'd like me to do that. I guess I'll ramp up. I'll start doing more of the climate videos. But part of the reason I haven't been motivated is because, since President Trump came along, he shut them down. It's not really an issue anymore. Although Jim made a good point that, when Gavin Newsom is president, this may well come roaring back. So maybe I'm being overly optimistic. The death of the climate scam, my assumption of the depth of the climate scam may be premature. So maybe I should continue providing information for people.
Speak while you can, Tony. You never know.
And I want to do 2 more rapid fire questions. First rapid fire question is from Weathercat, who says, I want to know why we measure CO2 at the edge of Mauna Loa. When I point that out to people, they have nothing to say. His other question related to this was, is he crazy in thinking that this is a conspiracy? And it's my understanding that it's actually a rather well-sited station, even though it's on the volcano. the like wind patterns or something that they located it on intentionally do not blow a lot of that pollution in there. But I think that there are days where they do get like bad winds or something, and they just don't use that data or something like that. I don't know. Anthony would definitely know, but maybe Tony does.
Yeah, I don't really think that's an issue. Like you said, there are times when Mauna Loa doesn't erupt very often. Most of the eruptions go on down at Kilauea, which is quite a bit lower elevation, and carbon dioxide sinks. There are times when it's disrupted, but I think that they get pretty similar readings there to other observatories in the region. So I don't think that's a huge issue.
I think part of it is it's the U.S. and it's easy. It's relatively easy access. If you put it on the top of Mount Everest, it would be a lot harder. It may measure CO2, but it'd be a lot harder to easily access it and make adjustments and fix equipment and things like that.
Yep. And then we've already gone over even our normal overtime, you guys, but there is one more question I want to get, and that is Modesto says, are you having a show next Thursday and Friday? The answer is no. We are taking the week off next week. So sorry about that, you guys. And that is it for me today. I'm going to hand it back to Jim. Here you go.
Thanks, Linnea. That is the end of today's episode of the Climate Realism Show, number 183. I want to thank very much our guest who is still here with us, that being Tony Heller. It's been too long between the times we've had you on this program, so we're going to have you on again a lot sooner than that. Also, Craig Rucker, the president of CFACT, was also with us today, giving us fantastic insight as usual, but especially about COP30 in Brazil, which he just returned from. I want to thank our streaming partners, junkscience.com, CFACT, the CO2 Coalition, Climate Depot, What's Up With That, and Heartland UK Europe. Thank you very much, producer Andy Singer, for doing so well behind the scenes to produce this show so it looks and sounds and is presented wonderfully. Thank you, Linnea Lueken. Thank you, Sterling Burnett, Uncle Bubba, the Archbishop of Ranterbury. The nicknames continue to pile up. And thank you very much to our audience, not just here live in the chat, but everybody who watches and listens to this podcast every week after we've already produced it. We will not see you next week. We will see you the week after next. So in 2 weeks, bye-bye.